This is my fourth mock draft for the Ravens and one that I ended up being quite proud of. But I guess first and foremost, I shouldn't lie. This is not my fourth one. This is probably my 104th. If you're anything like me, you've done so many run throughs on various websites and simulated the draft so many times that you kind of know where players are going to get picked in the simulations, not Thursday and Friday in the draft. I'll give you an example. Graham Barton and Troy Franklin, both still on the board. When I picked Tyler Guyton at 34 here, I didn't select them because I don't think those guys will be there anyway in a realistic situation. Me personally, I was able to look at some of the simulations and say, okay, that guy's not going to be there. I would like this to be somewhat realistic. This is my attempt to give you a somewhat realistic proposal to what the Ravens could do in a trade back scenario. It doesn't have to be with the Patriots at 34, it could be with the Raiders at 44. It really did for me get to the point with the mock draft websites where any anomaly, a player falling 5 to 7 picks further than they normally do, got my attention. Look, I even had multiple mock drafts where Caleb Williams didn't get selected first. I guess it's just the way it goes if you do as many as I did. Anyway, my Ravens selections here, I ended up trading back with the same team that I started trading back with 2 months ago, and that's the New England Patriots. In this case, this particular simulation, it's about the 10th or 12th time this has come up where they don't take a quarterback at 3, and I get a trade offer. In this case, they were moved back in to 30 to take Michael Penix, and I accepted their offer of 34 plus 68 for our first this year, 30, a sixth round draft pick this year, and then a comp fourth pick in 2025. I felt like it was robbery on our part as a Ravens for real, even though the points do almost match up precisely 2088 to 2075, according to the website that I used. And with the surplus picks that we have for next year, I wouldn't mind at all getting rid of even a fifth, a fourth, or a fifth this year, and a comp pick next year if it meant that we could recoup some of the value that I think Eric DeCosta talked about, the range of locations where they anticipate the most value to be. And in my opinion, I think that's between 40 and 75, 40 and 85, somewhere in that range. I think they'd like to maximize as many picks as possible. Look, will New England probably address quarterback at 3? Of course. I feel like they're being pressured into doing so. Is it possible for them or the Raiders or anyone else to deal back into round one to get a quarterback later on? I think it's possible. It would involve a lot of trust by their front office, however. I do think there's teams out there doing calculations right now in terms of teams that would look to draft the fourth or fifth or sixth quarterback off the board. If we draft or try to take a quarterback in this range, 5 to 13 or whatever the number is, how different is our situation going to be as if we try to draft a quarterback in the 25 to 32 range? I do think there's a team out there. I'm not sure if it'll be the Patriots or the Raiders that would try to go that route. The Raiders look like a possibility for me because they've already signed a guy in Gardner Minshew who can start and can get things done. As Ravens fans, we know that. So let's get into the picks that I've got here. First at 34, I took Guyton. Originally, this was just a 3-round mock draft, so I wasn't sure exactly how to address position. There was realistic talent on the board. Xavier Worthy, probably taken at 32 by the Chiefs. Adonai Mitchell was there still at this time as well. I don't think he would be there. Graham Barton was there. Jordan Morgan was there. So once I saw the number of tackles that were left, I thought that Morgan would probably be a guy that would be there at 34 in a realistic scenario. Guyton, probably not so much. So, in any case, I understand if people aren't as fired up about Guyton or Barton or Morgan as they might be about Adonai Mitchell or Xavier Worthy because of the big play potential of those guys. But getting back another third round pick for me at 68 was just the real gold. And especially because of that turnaround from 62 to 68, meaning you draft at 62 and then at 68 again. I thought that the Ravens would be looking to early in this process. I thought the Ravens would be looking to maybe hold on to 30 and try to move up from 93, but retain their 62. In my opinion, if they're offered something like this, whether it's 34 with the Patriots or 44 with the Raiders, and they can retain pick 62 and 93, I think that's the way to go if they can recoup another pick in that second, third round range. So the next two guys that I was able to select is Leggett at 62, and I just kept thinking, as this simulation was happening, I just kept thinking he was going to get picked. I think it was somewhere around pick 55 or 56. I was like, all right, I'm just going to let it go. I'm going to let it finish and see if he does get selected. My intention originally was wide receiver at 30 or 34, but this trade back offer with New England kept coming back. Guyton or Morgan being there would be fantastic if you ask me, and then the ability to draft a Javon Baker or Xavier Leggett or whoever your receiver is in that late second round, early third round range, and then having Melton available, I thought that was spectacular. I think he's game ready from day one. In terms of an outside corner, the Ravens have Brandon Stevens and Marlon Humphrey there, experience, guys who generally play right and left side. Melton, to me, especially with his testing, looks like a Brandon Stevens clone. Super athletic and capable of making physical plays. Actually, in a weird way, he may be more experienced and versatile than Brandon Stevens was when he was drafted. I don't mean right now. Max Melton steps in as day one more experienced than Stevens. I mean after Stevens came out of college, I would say he was more green and less experienced and less versatile than Max Melton is right now. To me, he fits in with the level of athleticism that Brandon Stevens has as well. Um, if we can get a corner who can contribute early and provide depth, and in the event that one of those guys is injured, I think that benefits the Ravens. And this range of picks, 62, 68, I think is a high percentage spot to do that. Certainly, there's still really good corners around late third round and fourth round where the Ravens have picks 113 and 130, similar to Ronald Darby last year in terms of expectation level. The number of plays that the Ravens coaches expected Darby to play each week fluctuated depending on the health of Marlon Humphrey. Basically, Max Melton would just fall into that role. Getting back to Leggett for a minute, really physical, strong wide receiver, makes those contested catches that the Ravens need in certain parts of the field and certain down and distances. I think every team needs one of those. I do like that for Leggett, he wouldn't need a ton of targets to have an impact. And the reality is he certainly would not get a ton of balls thrown to him in 2024 if Flowers, Andrews, Bateman, likely all survive the draft period, which we've all heard the rumors about Bateman being traded, and now Derrick Henry being in the backfield, getting presumably at least 15, 18 carries a game, which I project that he should get that as the jab to our offense. I think it's an incredibly talented offense, and if you add a guy like Leggett to it, he's 6'1", 6'2", somewhere in that range, 220. I think he's a perfect pick in terms of talent and long range projection based on that athletic talent. Guyton, Leggett, and Melton in the first three picks, I really felt like I was playing with house money for real. And then came upon the last pick and really took a lot of time, which doesn't, simulate the draft at all. And Cameron Kinchins was a guy who didn't perform well in testing, clearly. I think you're in a 4.64, 4.65, somewhere in that range. But I kind of couldn't resist him because the offensive linemen that were there, I wasn't a huge fan of. I think it's Pooney from Kansas. Mahogany from Boston College had just gone off the board as a guard, who I think is a ready-made starter at guard. Beebe had just been selected when I made this pick at 93. Kinchin's a safety with 11 interceptions in the last 2 years. A guy who I don't think plays the nickel a lot at all, really could step into that Geno Stone role, if you ask me. Someone who can play the left side safety when Hamilton drops down to be the nickel, which is, if you ask me, his most devastating location. Also, if another injury happens to Marcus Williams, has free safety skills, if you ask me. I think there's a lot of talent and potential there. I really didn't like some of the other players that were on the board at other positions, and you're welcome to disagree with me on this one. Austin Booker from Kansas, I'm not saying he doesn't have talent. He just wasn't someone that struck me as a guy who's going to come in and get snaps, get playing time over Ojabo, Owe, Van Noy, or even Tavius Robinson and Malik Harrison at that point. I think the Ravens are pretty settled at outside linebacker unless someone is sitting there at 30 or 62 or 93, or in this scenario, a trade back that they didn't expect to be there. Kinchins is a guy that I looked at it playing an actual safety position, a viable option to allow Hamilton to play where He basically has nuclear impact as the nickel. Kinchin's with the 40 time at the combine and other testing as well. I don't think the film matches up with that, and there's certainly other players who the film matches up with their athletic testing. All in all, I felt it was a really good start with these first three rounds, and not having to forfeit either pick 113 or 130. So still primed to add some serious talent, presumably at offensive line. I would have no problem if someone said, "Hey, coach, at pick 93, I think the offensive line should be fortified." I didn't see someone who I had to pick at 93 that wouldn't be there at 113 or maybe 130. Talking about an offensive lineman. If a if a Green or Javon Baker is there at 113, I take them, but I do have some positional favorites. I'm sure we all do, to be honest with you. I have two corners listed here, Green and Cam Hart. Throw Kyrie Jackson in there as well. I wouldn't have any trouble at all if the Ravens were able to add those guys at 113. I do think, just like Ken at Film Study Ravens and EA Edgar Allen has pointed out, I think Kyrie Jackson gets taken off the board before 113. Green is another guy who I think has put the tape out there, excuse me, and has the athletic traits that warrants a higher selection than 113 or maybe 130. Anyway, let me know what you think of the Ravens adding either of these types of corners, the quality of those guys. There's certainly others out there. Boston College has a really underrated corner. I think Jones, that's got great ball skills, number one, really athletic and quick. So there's certainly going to be players in that range that I think can come in and give you this a similar output as Green, Hart, or maybe even Kyrie Jackson. Running back doesn't look like a need for the Ravens with Derrick Henry as a free agent signing, and then Justice Hill returning after the impact that he had last year, which was mostly really good on film. Additionally, Keaton Mitchell will return from injury at some point during the 2024 season. I would look for that later rather than earlier. These two guys, Aldrich Estime and Isaac Garendo, I think provide the size. Even though in the case of Estime, he didn't test well in terms of a 40. Garendo certainly did. I think 4.39. These two guys fit the bill for what the Ravens do offensively, some downhill stuff. One cut guys, in the case of Garendo, someone who can certainly take it to the house with any particular carry. I do think that the possibility exists that the Ravens invest heavily on the offensive line from pick 113 onward. They're sitting on a lot of picks in the next 2 years and need to utilize those appropriately or effectively with the balloon in salary that Lamar Jackson's contract takes on eventually. It moves up to $74 million 2 years from now. Marlon Humphrey and Ronnie Stanley's salaries could come off the books, but we've still got some big salaries out there. Got to augment that or supplement it, offset it, I should say, with low-cost talent that can either start or come in and make an impact with limited reps. And these two guys, particularly Garendo, if you ask me, fit the bill there. Some of the offensive linemen that I really like on film that I haven't mentioned or won't go over with picks here is Javon Foster, Walter Rouse from Oklahoma, and then Caden Wallace from Penn State. People were not wrong talking about Caden Wallace as pass pro and some of the things he does really well. If the Ravens do address outside linebacker, edge rusher, whatever you want to call it, D end, I think it'll be later in this draft again, unless someone falls that should not do so. If there's a player sitting at 62, 68 in this scenario, or 93 who, quote, shouldn't be there, I wouldn't be surprised to see the Ravens pick up high-level talent. You guys let me know what you think of really the opener to this mock draft that I did. The only pick that I don't want to say regret, but the only pick that has caused me any rethoughts is the Cameron Kinchin's pick at 93. I think there's probably other positions that could get addressed sooner, but look, with Geno Stone departing, looking at a way to move Kyle Hamilton up to nickel position more on the field, where I think he's at his most impactful. A guy like Kinchin's or others being able to play free safety or split field safety looks like a good fit, man. I appreciate you guys' time. The mock draft season is certainly fun. I didn't get to produce nearly as much film content as I would have liked to. If you follow me on Twitter or subscribe to my Patreon, I've tried to put out as much as possible. Let me know what you think of this mock draft. particularly up through 3 rounds for the Ravens. If you think other Ravens fans would enjoy this projection video, probably my last before Thursday night's draft, then please consider grabbing a link to this video, sharing it out on social media to help this content get more reach.